a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old boy believes that they're immortal and that they're the most important person in the world. That's fine if you're 8 years old. But when you end up with adult men who think that they're going to live forever, they're immortal, and they're the most important person in the world, that's a big problem. I believe we live in a world that's been run by boys, and it's a fucking disaster.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Man with Purpose. Today I have the pleasure to be joined by Dr. Arne Rubinstein. Arne is an expert in rites of passage in adolescent development. I think with more than 30 plus years experience as a medical doctor, counselor, mentor, speaker, and a workshop facilitator. He's also the CEO of the Australian Rites of Passage Institute, where they are using the educational model of the Rites of Passage Framework to help individuals strengthen their sense of self, learn critical skills, and create a healthy vision for the future. And with that, I want to welcome you, sir. Thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Normally, I start the podcast with just taking a few deep breaths and checking in whatever is present for you right now. So whenever you're ready, you can take a deep breath and
Well, I'm happy to check in. So thank you. And first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast in Bulgaria, I believe you are, which is special because I'm here in Australia and I just love that we have this connection happening more and more around the world. And I've been doing this for not quite 30 years, but nearly. And that connection wasn't there. And the work and the growth in the work in the last years has been really quite extraordinary. So that's a very exciting thing for me. And I'll maybe talk about that more through the podcast. But in terms of a check-in,
sure.
Well, I'm actually in quite a big time at the moment. I'm staying at my brother's house in Melbourne, which is in a different part of Australia from where I live. And unfortunately, I'm here because we had a suicide in the family of a young man. And that's a very challenging place for our whole family. And my nephew was very troubled and had a hard life and got in all sorts of trouble and drugs and everything you can think of. However, he was still one of our family, and I remember the day he was born and I watched him grow up, and now he's dead. And it's a big thing on many, many levels, really big. And because of Corona, I couldn't travel initially to get to my brother. And that was very hard because I knew as soon as it happened, I have to get to my brother. I have to get to him. And just on that, it's very interesting because I've been in a bit of death in the last year. My mother passed away a year ago, and now my nephew, and my father is actually in the dying process as well. And I realized that death is not just a moment or a single event. It's a whole journey. It's a whole unfolding in terms of what I'm seeing my brother, for example, going through. And there's all the grief, but there's also so much love and support. And even though it's death, it's a regenerative process in that people are coming together, people are joining up and meeting and speaking to each other, and they may not have done so for many years and wouldn't have, but this has brought them together, and friendships are being remade. So as challenging as it is, there's also a very beautiful side. It's actually a sacred time. So I'm in a sacred time, and there are many deep ingredients in that sacred time. Even me coming down and moving in with my brother again, and I'm just going to stay here for as long as I need to be here. My brother and I shared a room for the first 20 years of our lives and haven't since. And I'm not in his room, but I'm in his house. And so, there's a lot going on for me at the moment. So thank you for giving me the chance to check in.
Thank you very much for sharing all of this. My condolences for your loss. Oof. I normally check in with a lot of gratitude, and I think it's still the case right now. Your check-in, I think, kind of made me think about exactly what you described, how it's a regenerative process and people are coming together, which otherwise may not have been. I recently also had maybe not so recent, maybe 7 or 8 months right now. My grandmother passed away, and it was interesting to see like all the family coming together. And if it wasn't for that, maybe we wouldn't have seen each other for quite a long time. Everybody lives quite differently. I think the distances aren't as big as they are in Australia, but yeah. So maybe it's something that I'm actually interested to explore a little bit more. Is there a proper way to go through this? Because I think I've seen men from my family, whenever something like this does happen, and they would not allow themselves to cry in front of everybody. And I've always thought, I've been a little bit in two minds. Part of me is incredibly respectful of the fact. Part of me is thinking, are they really holding something back? And this, this grieving process, which I think is incredibly valuable, is a little bit neglected from what I see. Maybe what's your take on that?
Sure. Well, I happen to have some quite strong thoughts about that as it happens. And the first thing is that my area of specialty is rites of passage. And this is a rite of passage. A rite of passage is a transformational process that moves you from one stage in life to the next. And a rite of passage is a community process. And there's no question that when my mother died, when your grandmother died, when my nephew dies, that's a rite of passage for them. They move into their final place, which is they become ancestors. And that's a community process. And that's why it's regenerative, because people come together to celebrate, to grieve, to share stories, to honor the person who's passed away. So it actually has all the elements of a rite of passage in it. The question you ask about what is the correct grieving process, when my mother passed away, I did actually quite a bit of research into that. And most of the major religions and traditions have a formal grieving process. And the reason for it is they want you to fully grieve on every level, and then they want you to actually come out of the grieving. So if you don't do either of those properly, it's a problem. And the best one that I found, my upbringing was actually in a Jewish family. And the Jewish way of grieving is very, very interesting, and it's very structured. And basically, and we followed it when my mother passed away, and it was quite extraordinary. And the first thing that happens is after the person dies, the immediate family stays at home for 7 days, and people come and visit them, and they're supposed to tear their clothes, tear an item of clothing to show that they're in the grieving, and they sit at home and people come and visit and bring them food so that the people who are grieving don't have to do anything. They can just be fully in the grieving. And you're not supposed to wash other than if you need to, but it's, you don't dress up, you don't change your clothes. The theory is that you can be completely stricken by the grief and not able to function, and people will come around and look after you. And one of the bits that, and I did it at home in my family home, incredibly powerful. Old friends of my mother, the elderly relatives, the young nephews, people who'd worked with my family, everyone you could think of would come around and sit. And there's a beautiful sort of regulation that the people who come and visit, when they're sitting there, are not the ones, they're not allowed to start the conversation.
Wow.
So they sit there until the people who are grieving speak to them. Because what you don't want is people to come in and say stupid things or just fill up the air with words. And so you're supposed to stay there for a week, and then after a week, that part of it finishes. And then for the next 30 days, it's very limited travel, not listening to music, you don't listen to music, you don't go to parties, things like that. And then at the end of 30 days, there's a moment, it's called stuff up, and you're supposed to stand up, go for a walk around the block, and start to reintegrate back into the world. And there are limitations on what you do for 12 months. And then after 12 months, you're supposed to resume fully normal life. And
wow,
it's a very powerful process, because what they're saying is go fully into it, feel it, experience it. And then after a certain period of time, it's over and you've got to get on with life. And I very much believe, and Brene Brown talks about this in her work, that if we have an emotion and we don't fully process it, it gets stuck inside us, in our psyches, and it comes out later in unhealthy ways. And so the reason why the religions and traditions have these grieving processes is because they actually want you to fully experience the emotion. And to be honest, I've been watching with my brother, who has been completely cracked open, and he's more vulnerable, more loving, more present than I've ever known him in my life. And he's normally a stoic, strong man, and he's just completely, distraught. And then, after a month, the funeral was actually delayed because of COVID and everything for a month. And then after the funeral, I can see there's a shift in him. And the grief is still there, but it's not to that same level. But I'm very proud of him, that I feel like he's really processing the grief. And I feel that will allow him somewhere in the future to get on with his life. My concern would be when they say someone's doing really well, they're good. They're not actually good. That's when we stuff things inside, and then later on, we wonder why we get angry or we get depressed or people are drinking every night. So I don't feel personally that it's a sign of strength to not show emotions. I actually think it's more of a sign of strength to be open and to be able to show emotions. And I think this is one of the big things that's come out of the modern men's work. Really the aim is to be who we are, which includes our emotions.
Wow. Powerful answer. Thank you. Thanks for going so deep with that. I want to take it a few steps back and just rewind the clock a little bit and start with continue with your personal story, and what were you like as a young man, and at what point did you find the work or just being exposed to men's work, and how did that change you? Big questions.
Sure. No, happy to answer that. Well, I would have to say I was when I look at photographs of myself as a teenager, they were probably the most miserable years of my life. I think I know that I struggled as a teenager. I was really quite confused and lonely, and I didn't really have people I could speak to. My father was a hard-working man, but always wanted to tell me what to do and how to live my life, and he knew the answers. And that didn't work for me once I got to about 14. So I basically just stopped talking to him. I mean, I was polite. I said the things I needed to, but we certainly never had discussions about important things that I would have loved to known about, like sexuality and women and relationships and 100 other things. Just didn't happen. And that all created quite a lot of confusion for me. And, I looked for trouble from about 15, 16, and I found it. And I was lucky that I got through it without a disaster. And as we know, way too many young men don't get through that. And then I got married quite young for then, 25, 24. And when I was 27, I had two sons in nappies, 1.5 and 3.5 years old, 18 months and 3.5 years old. And I'd married a woman from overseas, from Canada, and for whatever reasons, the marriage broke up, and she overnight went back to Canada, and I found myself with an 18-month and a 3.5-year-old son, both in nappies. And I think that was actually when I grew up. That was the first time in my life that I had to put someone else in front of me. I couldn't just go surfing. I couldn't just go to the gym. I couldn't stay late at work. I had responsibilities. And the 6 months that I had them on my own was the most difficult and profoundly beautiful 6 months of my life, because I had to be father and mother, and it brought out a whole different side of me. It was really quite extraordinary. And it was actually after that I got into men's work. And I went to my first men's gathering when I was 29. And I was astonished when I got there that basically all the men had the same 5 issues, or elements of the same 5 issues. Most of the men had 3, 4, or 5 of these issues that I recognized. Because when I went there, I thought, I wonder what's going to be for these men. And these were the issues that I noticed. The first was unresolved with their fathers. Never having been accepted or acknowledged or received what the love in the way they wanted it from their fathers. So there was a massive father pain there. The second issue that I saw men struggling with is, what's my purpose? What am I really here to do? And I know it's not the job I'm doing at the moment, but what am I supposed to do? So that was the second one. The third one was, when am I going to feel like I really am a man, not a boy? Even though I might look like a man, when am I going to feel inside I'm a man? The fourth one was, how in the world do I have a healthy relationship? Because I never saw one modeled and no one taught me about it. So how do you have a healthy relationship? And the fifth one was, how do I be a good father? Wow. With my own children. How do I have a healthy relationship with my own children? How am I supposed to be? And it was those 5 things that I saw most men struggling with, all or some of those things, very much me included. And then at that gathering, someone said, well, imagine if there'd been something there for us when we were teenagers, our lives could have been very different. And that was the first time I heard the word Rites of Passage. And then not long after that gathering, we actually ran a program for boys and men, and I was invited along to help. And maybe because I was a doctor and they wanted a bit of credibility or safety or something. And we took 28 men and boys out in the bush for 3 days and nights. And this is a while ago. This is like 1994.
Wow.
And something happened. Like, it wasn't just a good weekend, it was extraordinary. And I got bitten by the bug, and I was like, wow, this is powerful. I want to know this. And that was when I started studying rites of passage all around the world, and discovered that every community would create a rite of passage, and they would all do the same things. And so I looked at that, and then I looked at how we could bring that into a modern context. And at the same time, I was working as a doctor, and I was working in emergency medicine, and I was seeing all these teenage boys coming in who had just done the stupidest things that they could think of. And typically, but when I looked at what they were doing, there was a theme. It either involved the possibility of death or having to deal with extreme pain. So if they could find some way to use wheels, speed, height, jumping, anything like that, they would do it. And if they set up a jump, or if they created something, because they'd spend days and hours building something, and then if they succeeded, the first thing they'd do is go back and make it bigger, make it higher, make it harder. And it could only end in one way, which was when they came and ended up seeing me. So that was, and I related that back to my own life, what I did. I used to slide my car around the corners, my first car, and drive as fast as I could, and, all of that. So that was sort of how I got into it. And just to finish off, I used to set up Rites of Passage programs every year, and I became increasingly frustrated with medicine, because even though I believe in medicine itself and being a doctor, what I was seeing is that we were very often dealing with the symptoms and not the cause. And we were also in a system that had a lot of problems. The system of medicine. Unfortunately, I don't want to go into it necessarily, but there are big problems in the system. And so that frustrated me. But when I looked at what we were able to achieve with Rites of Passage, I saw that we were changing people's lives from a young age. Rather than waiting until we're 30, 40, 50, 60 to be doing our men's work, we were starting it when they were 14. And I could see the impact that was having, and how that would impact the whole rest of their lives. So I ended up leaving my work as a doctor and moving into full-time creating Rites of Passage around Australia and around the world.
Wow. Cool. Wow. Would you say that, pretty much most of those men that are coming in, is it safe? I mean, not to generalize, of course, but is it safe to say that, again, those are symptoms for something missing? I can't remember. I was reading it in a book where, the boy comes of age, and I think it was fire in the belly. And there is a void that opens for a boy, and that void needs to be filled with healthy masculinity, however people define it. But if it doesn't, it gets filled with demons, and that kind of results in all sorts of this kind of behavior that eventually leads either to fatalities or to ending up with injuries, or coming and seeing you for whatever reason. Do you think that's a symptom of what you were observing?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's a symptom. And not only that, it not only leads to those things. So basically, a lot of the boys are trying to create their own initiation, their own rite of passage. So when I studied rites of passage all around the world, one of the things I saw is that they always created a challenge for the boy. And they always created the challenge where the boy could potentially die or had to deal with great pain. Now, sometimes they could literally die. Other times there was the illusion that they could die. But they one of the shifts required is to understand that we're mortal and to be humbled. And one of the biggest problems of not creating rites of passage is that the boy belief system, the boy psychology, continues into adult years. So a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old boy believes that they're immortal and that they're the most important person in the world. That's fine if you're 8 years old. But when you end up with adult men who think that they're going to live forever, they're immortal, and they're the most important person in the world, that's a big problem. And I actually wrote a model on the difference between boy psychology and healthy man psychology. And some of those elements are a boy, and you think an 8-year-old, I'm the center of the universe. I need constant acknowledgement, someone to tell me how good I am all the time, preferably my mother. I'm never wrong. It's always someone else's fault. I don't take responsibility for my actions. I can't handle my emotions. If I don't get what I want to have, I have a temper tantrum. And I want a mother. And I want a mother to do everything for me, to be my servant, to be my slave, to kiss me, to pick, to everything. Now, once again, that's okay in an 8-year-old. But my concern is because we don't have rites of passage, we end up with a lot of men who still think they're the center of the universe, still want constant acknowledgement, can never be wrong, don't take responsibility for their actions. If they don't get what they want, they have a temper tantrum, which is actually domestic violence in adults. And they're still looking for a mother. They think that women are there to serve them. And a rite of passage is designed to move from boy psychology to healthy man psychology, which is, I'm not the center of the universe, I'm part of a community. And my actions affect others. And power is not just for me. If I have more power, it means I can do more good in my community. And I have to be able to acknowledge when I'm wrong and actually do something about fixing it up. I'm not going to live forever, and that affects how my actions. And if I'm allowed to be angry, but I'm not allowed to punch someone or swear at them or abuse them, all of those things. And I'm not looking for a mother. I'm looking for relationships. And we're different in relationship, but we're both equally as important. And we respect each other's needs and creativity, and it's a learning, growing, loving situation. And my great concern, and I've seen this as a doctor and as a man for so many years, is that we have so much boy behavior. In fact, I believe we live in a world that's been run by boys. And it's a fucking disaster. Some of the most powerful people, or people in the most powerful positions in the world, are boys. It's just about them. They don't take responsibility. They treat women, so that's to me a big issue. And the main reason why Indigenous communities and society created rites of passage was to create that shift.
Wow. I'm getting goosebumps just by listening to you saying all this. I'm a big believer that I think we haven't really seen patriarchy per se. I think we've been seeing, for the most part, boy psychology.
Boy behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Arrested development in a man's body, pretending to be man and just kind of projecting all the shadows and the issues onto other people. And then, patriarchy is responsible for everything. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah, fuck, man. That's exactly right. They talk about toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, as if that is not what they are. It is pure boy behavior. Good men, real men, evolved men, healthy men are a beautiful, strong, loving, kind, switched on, part of the society.
Yeah.
But men who are boys are destructive and will destroy everything, including the planet.
I can't remember. I was speaking with another guest, I think also from Australia, from Perth, Tim Morrison, and we were I was kind of saying or reflecting, I guess, based on something he said, that I see everything through this kind of lens of men's work. I see that is potentially one of the biggest problems of our, species, if you will, because man is responsible for so many things, including having access to nuclear, weapons, and click of a button and everything just goes to shambles. So I hope it doesn't get to that, and I don't want to be doom and gloom here, but it just goes to show the underlying need of something like that.
Yeah.
Rites of passage.
And we see it, and I see it when I go to the various men's gatherings, and how there's this hunger. So there's a hunger amongst the boys for rites of passage. There's a hunger amongst the men to do rites of passage for the boys. And there's also a hunger amongst the men to do their own rites of passage. And the thing I need to say is that rites of passage are not just for boys becoming young men. So I look at it like life is a staircase, and we move up those stairs from baby to child to boy to young man to adult man to elder to final state, and each of those steps requires a rite of passage, or traditionally would have a rite of passage. I have a great concern that we don't have enough healthy elders in our communities. And I actually extended my model of boy to man, from boy to man to elder. And elder is as different from man as man is from boy. So man is about going out in the world and building your empire and making your mark and doing good things and finding your partner and having your family and being strong and able to solve any problems and protecting everyone. Fantastic.
Yeah.
But elder is, I'm moving towards elder. I'm 58 years old, 57, nearly 58. So I'm not an elder, but I'm just sort of looking into that space. I'm feeling moving towards it. And I realize that elder, I don't want to build empires anymore. My role has to be to support the next generation building those empires. And I'm not as strong as I used to be. Sometimes when I go to the grocery store, I even let the boy who's working there carry my box of vegetables to the car. I would have never done that before. But, it's okay. It's okay.
Self-awareness, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I don't have to be number one anymore, and don't have to win every competition, and it's about the journey, and it's about, I see two people fighting and they both want to say I'm right, you're wrong, and elder is more about, well, what if you're both right? And what if you're both wrong? It's a whole different way. And also as an elder, I'm seeing death on the horizon. And it's still a horizon away, but when I was a boy and a man, it didn't actually even really exist for me. So, and elder, I think as I feel into it, it's a much more relaxed place than man. I don't have to get out of bed every morning as early as I can because I've got so many things to do. So, but the other thing is the incredible importance of the elders and the young. I think with rites of passage and this whole structure, when you skip a generation, something works really well. Like, for example, there's a saying that grandfathers and grandchildren have a special bond. And one of the reasons they have a special bond is because they have a common enemy. And when you get the elders and the young together, the elders pass on the wisdom and knowledge, and the young soak it up. And from that relationship between the elders and the young get the wisdom and knowledge, and they get seen. They get love, they get that unconditional, easy love. And the elders get energy, which is what they need. And they also get to pass on their wisdom and knowledge, which is also something they need. So, a big part of my work is moving into a place of, we need to honor and utilize the elders in our community. And elder is not just because they're older in years. Eldering is actually a verb, to elder. So we have a lot of work to do there because, unfortunately, for most of us, there's a lot of shame in getting older. and we get rejected and we get pushed aside, and oh, this is no place for elders. And my hope and what I see is that the work that's happening in a lot of the men's organizations and groups really does respect the elders, or is moving towards that place. And not just respecting them in terms of like, oh, well, you can have the cushion when you sit down.
Yeah.
It's actually listening to them. And yeah, I'm very interested in all of that.
Wow. I mean, you're saying a lot of things, and I'm just getting, again, like goosebumps and just like these kind of sensations when you say that, you know, the boy needs to be seen, maybe because I'm making reflections on my own life when I was a younger, not even a man, but a younger boy, and just I wanted to be seen by my, whether it's my father or my kind of a mentor that I put up on a soapbox, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to know your perspective on this. Where did this relationship?
Hey, let me just go somewhere with that for a moment.
Please.
Let me go somewhere with that for a moment. You absolutely want to be seen, and you absolutely should be seen. Absolutely. But if you stand around waiting for your father to be the one who sees you, it may never happen. And this is a big thing. You know, it's very possible that being seen is going to happen by other men or by grandparents. And we need to create that situation where, because there's a lot of men who never were seen by their fathers and are probably never going to be. And if we say that every man who wasn't seen by his father is fucked, that's a big problem. And in fact, if you study deeper into these men in power, you'll find the majority of them have major father issues. Yeah.
There's no surprises. Yeah.
No surprises.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess, would you be able to comment or at least give your take on what do you think this kind of father-son relationship got severed? Was it because of, you know, we fell maybe a little bit a victim of our own prosperity and technology, and the Industrial Revolution happened and father went away from the family, or perhaps it's something else?
Well, traditionally, the boy would be taken away from the family, including from the father, so that he could go through his growth and transformation and development without the restrictions of the father. And the boy would go away for a period of time, which could be 10 years, more, and then come back. And he would go away, and he would be taken away from his mother so that he could move out of the mothering relationship. Probably don't have to explain why that's a very important thing to do.
Yeah.
But we could talk about what happens when that doesn't happen. But also, the elder men would come and they would take the boys, and the boy's father would not go on the rite of passage.
This is the first time I'm ever hearing this. Like I've dove deep into that, but it makes so much sense because the father's shadow is going to be looming over, I guess.
Correct. And why is it that so many young men leave their home, leave their village, go out in search of their own glory, but then unfortunately many or most of them never come back? Wow. And then we end up with the breakdown of community. And tied in with that is, while the boy is gone, the father is actually supposed to go through his own rite of passage. Because if we think about a staircase, and everyone in the community is on the staircase, for the boy to move from being a boy to a young man, well, his mother needs to move. She needs to let go of mothering. And at the same time, she also needs to let go of something in her youth and her fertility and move towards being an elder woman, which we're not managing at all well. And the men, we men, we also need to move and start letting go of that man energy and moving more towards elder energy, so that we don't stay in competition with our own sons, which is what so often happens. And, men don't want to move towards elderhood because it means we're letting go of our power and our strength and our masculinity. But that is what it's going to happen anyway. And because we're not guided through this, when men are not guided, they will try and stay down the staircase. And then we end up with a staircase with everybody trying to be down the bottom instead of having it all spread out and everybody in the right role that they need to be in.
Wow.
Now, having said all of that, rites of passage need to change and be appropriate to the community they're going to be run in. So if we're going to create rites of passage in Bulgaria, we're not going to do the same thing that they might have done 200 or 300 years ago, because the world's very different now. And we know today that the father-son relationship, the boys will generally stay living at home till their mid-20s or even early 30s, or a lot longer than they used to. And so somehow we actually probably do need to be including the fathers in the rite of passage. But the key there is to make sure that it's not a group of fathers going along just to create a rite of passage for the boys, that we're actually creating a rite of passage for the men as well, because they haven't been through their own rites of passage.
Wow. You hear sometimes indigenous people say that there are these ways of how maybe life works, and you can see that there is a balance between everything, and how there is a natural progression, like you said, on the staircase. But because we've kind of maybe suppressed things, or due to changes in lifestyle, it's probably accumulation of factors that really impacted this. Like everybody seems to be not really going up the staircase, but actually staying down there. I can see this with my father and my brother. Like now they're like this. My father doesn't want to let go of the business and just kind of keeps there. And I hope my brother doesn't end up growing up and resenting him, because that in the past, I just came back from DMG, and they were saying that whenever a father or becomes a corrupt king or corrupt ruler or whatever, the children would conspire, rebel, and eventually kill him. Now that could be physically or could be metaphorically, but I don't want that to happen for my brother. So we have regular talks about that to kind of prevent it, or to at least allow him to see his father through his own eyes, or through his own eyes, and not through the mother's eyes, because that also happened.
Yes, and you need to get your father to the EMG.
Oh wow, okay. We need to work on that for sure.
Yeah, but this is a big thing where the men don't want to let go of their power, and then that power ends up becoming toxic, and it leads to a breakdown in the relationship between the father and his son. And these things don't happen naturally, which is why they had rites of passage, and the facilitators would come in, the elders would come in and say, hey, we're not asking you to let go of your power. We're telling you to let go of your power.
Yeah, man.
It's not a discussion.
Yeah.
It's not a request.
I think the Maasai men from what I read that lie on the borders of Tanzania and Kenya, they believe that masculinity has to be deliberately kind of pushed. It cannot be just, oh yeah, maybe I want to go, maybe I don't want to go. No, motherfucker, like, you are going, like that's it.
That's right. They wouldn't ask the boys if they want to go on their rite of passage. They would come and grab them in the middle of the night. And there's a very interesting tradition in one of the Native American Indian tribes where the men had big ponytails, and they would go and ride their horses and they'd go out in battle and all of that. And then when they reached a certain age, when they were moving towards elderhood, one day they would take the man and they would cut off his ponytail and they would hang it up inside the teepee. And from that time on, those men wouldn't go out to battle. They would sit in the circle of elders, in the wise council.
Wow. Wow.
So there was a clear delineation when it was your time to take on a different role. But then those men, the elders, had a very important role in keeping the men in check. And when there's no elders overseeing the men, the risk is that those men get a bit of power and then they become megalomaniacs.
Like what's happening right now with all of these politicians around the world.
Yeah, that's right. They don't have a circle of elders saying, no, that's not okay. You can't do that. First of all, you're lying, and that's not okay. Second of all, you're not looking after your community properly. That's not okay. And third of all, you're thinking about yourself first. Not okay. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking, who is keeping those men in check? Maybe nobody right now. I mean, the people, that's kind of the community, but
no, they're not. But the people are not able to, because those men in power have armies under them. You know, all these things. And when you start to look at it this way, the metaphorically, you can see so much more clearly what's going on.
Wow. I mean, that's a rabbit hole in and of itself. We can go.
It's a rabbit.
Yeah, it's way deeper. I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe just quickly, we talked a little bit about what happens when the father doesn't let go and the boy needs to be seen, but maybe for whatever reason it doesn't, and hopefully it goes and is being seen by other elders. What happens if the boy stays too long with the mother?
Oh, that's a disaster. Well, if the boy stays too long with the mother, then there's a number of things happen. Instead of being able to form healthy relationships, resolve his own problems, he'll keep coming back to his mother. And actually, probably the best way to describe it, I mean, I have a personal story around that because I was very close to my mother and no one took me away from my mother. And I thought, beautiful, it's my mother. And then when I turned 25, I met a very special woman from overseas and fell in love with her and wanted to be with her. And my mother didn't want me to. And it was a big problem. And I remember saying, I feel like I'm being pulled by wild horses in both directions. Why should I have to choose between my mother and my woman? And with my woman, I used to argue in favor of my mother. And with my mother, I used to argue in favor of my woman. And it completely didn't work. And I had 2 children with that woman. The relationship between my mother and me and my woman and I all broke down. And eventually my woman left and I had the 2 children on my own. A year later, I went on a men's program, and one of the elderly men there, Don Boak, who was one of my elders, shared a story from an African story. And at the end of the story, the young boy who's fallen in love with a maiden, as happens in these stories, has to choose between his mother and his maiden. He has to choose. And the one he chooses he stays with, and the other one dies.
Wow.
That's it. You have to choose your mother or your maiden. And when I heard that story, I cried most of the night realizing, and they always tell this story, by the way, to boys on their initiation, on their rite of passage. And what they're saying is you will get to a stage where you have to choose. Because if they don't, and the right answer, by the way, is to choose your woman, choose your maiden. Because if you don't choose, what will happen is a man has a problem with his wife. He's on the phone to his mother. You know, his mother's always saying that the wife is not good enough. It's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. And that man is at big risk of never being able to form a healthy relationship because his mother will always get in between. And I remember some years later, I met another woman who I got married to, and my mother started making a bit of a fuss about it. And I remember saying to my mother, Mum, this is my woman. If you want to be involved in my family, you need to accept her, because if you don't, it's going to be a big problem, because this is my woman and I'm choosing her.
Mm.
And my mother loved that woman, loved her. And even after I separated from her, 20 years later, my mother would still be asking about her, and we'd go and visit her together, and, completely different. But no one tells us that as boys or as young men.
I was having my conversation with my mother, not recently, but maybe a couple of years ago, when she was saying, there's going to be a time where a woman comes in your life and you have to choose her. So maybe there is a little bit of wisdom. And even though
she's a wise woman.
Yeah. Even though she said that I might not like it at the time, but you have to choose her, because then it becomes a bit of a nightmare if you don't.
Well, very few women would have the wisdom and the strength to say what your mother said to you. So blessings on your mother.
Thank you, sir. I think that's become because of other traumas and wounds that she had to heal. So I appreciate her wisdom every single day for that. A couple more questions before we finish.
Which, by the way, brings up the thing about how exactly what you said, the healing and the growth, or the learning we get from our wounds and our trauma. And one of the common elements of rites of passage is creating a trauma and even a wound as a way of growing. And then there's the other problem. We see our children and our boys especially, look after them. They're not allowed to make mistakes. They're not allowed to get hurt. They're not allowed to get in trouble. And so they don't get the wounds and they don't get the trauma and they don't grow.
There's no lessons in there,
they end up as men in the world, and they're still boys.
This is what we were speaking with my partner right now. We're thinking even about children in a couple of years. A couple of years back, the thought of that would have terrified me. But now I'm thinking, that's another rites of passage, an opportunity for me to step up. And we said we need to let them go outside and get dirty, get messy, and learn how life is. Otherwise, just like looking at them like precious eggs and I don't want nothing to happen to you. I think that's not necessarily the way to do things.
And it's about doing what you're talking about well, but it's a tricky one, because at some stage we need to let them go out into the world, and if they've never made a mistake before that, or if they've never had anything go wrong, then when they're out in the world and something does go wrong, they don't actually know how to deal with it. So that's another rabbit hole that we could happily go down.
It's easier said than done. I understand where you're coming from.
And by the way, at the end of this podcast, I'll give you a link, and if we can put it up, and if people want to get a free PDF of my book, The Making of Men, which is all about raising boys, then I'd be very happy to do that. So if we can find a way to put it with the notes, I'm very happy for people to get a free copy of my book that way.
Amazing. I'll be sure to link it in the show notes. It's going to be on YouTube and on the other platforms that we distribute the podcast. So that's a great gift. Thank you, sir.
Great.
I think that kind of answered one of my questions, which was what can we do for future generations, which is I think you already kind of summarized, do your own work. And is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Look, I think the more awareness we have around rites of passage, men's work, stages of life, the better. And I see a real shift happening. We worked out that the work that we've been involved in is now happening in over 20 countries around the world, and over 300,000 people have been through programs. And I don't know if there's anything happening in Bulgaria.
No, it's only right now.
It's you.
Nobody else. Yeah, really.
But I do know that, rites of passage happening more and more. And as I said, rites of passage are for everyone. You know, when we talk about the staircase, the boy moves up, the mother moves up, the father moves up, the whole community moves up. And so bringing rites of passage in, creating men's programs, creating circles where young men can just talk and feel safe to express their feelings is so incredibly valuable and important.
Wow. Yeah. I actually almost wish that someone was here, but I wouldn't say I took it on myself to build that, but I see nobody else is here. That's partially why this podcast, partially why I'm having these conversations, so I can learn and bring some of these gifts in my own limited capacity as a fairly young man. So I understand these limitations, but yeah, I want to bring it more because I see it through the men. I go training jiu-jitsu and I see some of the men that are in their own way looking up to me or asking for some advice, maybe because I've traveled a little bit more. So I really want to be able to show them what we're discussing here and to really experience that as opposed to just intellectualizing about it. So
Yeah. Great. Well, one of my greatest joys has been coming to Europe and running Rites of Passage leadership trainings. And when I've run them in Sweden, Denmark, Holland, and when I was at the European Men's Gathering, we had 42 men from, I think, 25 countries learning about Rites of Passage, and quite a number of them have gone and set up Rites of Passage in their own countries. And my hope is that from next year, we'll be able to travel again and continue the journey of training and supporting men to set up Rites of Passage all over Europe.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be something I'm going to be looking forward to eagerly. All right, one last question. I know that we covered a lot of things and I wish we could have gone a little bit deeper, but maybe we do part two. Was there a question that you wanted me to ask you that I didn't?
Was there a question that I wanted you to ask me? Look, I think it's actually a pleasure to do an interview and to talk about different things in this topic. You know, we got to talk about death, we got to talk about boys, we got to talk about elders. I guess actually that does bring up a question around rites of passage for girls. And I've come to believe that in the same way as every traditional community created rites of passage for their boys, they also created them for their girls. And my hope is that in the future, we'll see boys' rites of passage being run over here and girls' rites of passage being run over here. And then at some stage, those boys and girls will come together and talk about relationships, talk about their vision for the world, talk about how they want to be, and actually have an opportunity to genuinely listen to each other. And I think, you know, I learned nothing I went to an all-boys school, learned nothing about relationships as a teenager. And to start that work at 14, 15, I think would be enormously powerful. So not necessarily a question, but something that I'm very happy we get the opportunity to mention here at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way to end, something for me definitely to think about and to wonder and maybe discuss it with you someday when we do meet. Okay, for people that resonated with this interview, with your energy, with your story, with your work that you're doing, where can they find a little bit more about you?
Well, the best place is through our website, and we can put that in the show notes, the Rites of Passage Institute, and we're building a community of people who we can send information to. We also have our own webinars, YouTube channel, and we're working in schools around Australia, and we're looking at ways to find people who can take our work into schools in Europe. We have an online journey into Rites of Passage training program. So lots of stuff there through our website, and we hope that people will access it that way.
Well, yeah, for everybody listening or watching this interview, please go check out the website. The work that Arne Rubinstein is doing is special. Let's put it this way, mildly. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Again, thank you very much, sir, for doing this. This has been an eye opener for me, and I felt like I sit through a lecture, just having the pleasure of just observing and asking the questions. Yeah,
Thank you,
very much for
my
that.
pleasure.
Okay, thanks everybody. See you in the next one.